Supplying more.
On sultry afternoons across Uganda's urban suburbs, it's common to see Shabe football patrons placing their bets on English football teams. Ugandans in droves are indulging in gambling as the Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Body estimates that averagely 150 billion shillings is spent annually on gambling. Exactly how big the industry is in Uganda remains vague. It is expected that by 2022, the global gambling market could be worth $635 billion, according to findings by Dublin, Ireland-based research and markets consultancy. In Uganda, the opaque gambling industry, albeit difficulty to quantify, has expanded to the extent of generating 45 billion shillings in revenues in the last financial year 2017-2018 and at least 50 billion shillings targeted in the next financial year, which starts in July. In light of this unprecedented growth, government has now placed the sector under scrutiny, with officials saying a raft of policy measures are in the offing. The new measures, according to previous reports, are aimed at containing the enormous capital flight and controlling the rampant wave which has morphed into some form of informal employment. Last week, Finance Minister Matia Kasaija wrote to the Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board reinforcing that Cabinet had stopped any licensing or renewal of licenses of all gaming and betting companies in the country. Kasaija's letter was post-scripted with a cabinet resolution noting that, I quote, after the current licenses issued on sports betting expire, the state would have the monopoly on sports betting activities countrywide, I close quotes. While the directive is still reverberating, particularly within the gambling sector, there are reports about what could be the premise of the decision. Sources say there's a group of senior government officials who are trying to sneak into Uganda, a betting company with shadowy links in Europe, where it is domiciled, to operate as a sports betting monopoly. The company, which according to sources is being peddled by one of the ministers of finance, has promised several things including generating more tax revenues and jobs. Other sources say the gambling industry is rife with corruption and the blockade on new licensing and renewal of licenses is a temporary action as government moots a clean-up exercise. State Minister for Finance in charge of planning David Bahati, who first announced the ban on gambling in January, told NTV that the industry will be better regulated with few players.
Our position as government is that this sector must be controlled by government and Ugandans. Avoid capital flight. We have seen companies who come here and play these games and all the money goes out. If this money remains here, then it will be beneficial to our country.
Besides containing the enormous capital flights, Bahati said while they recognize its impact on the economy in broader terms, the industry is wasting away a majority of the country's youths.
That to young people, gaming and betting is not a substitute for hard work, and do not gamble your school fees or hard-earned money into this sector. But if you can make money and have some responsible money to play with, then you can do that.
He says by the time Cabinet took the decision, it was well thought out.
Being selective, as you know, we are also pushing to see that all these companies, the telecom companies, float their shares on the exchange, the market, so that Ugandans can participate in it. So we are working on the regulations to compare every foreign company to float their shares, but the regulations will be coming soon so that we minimize on the issue of capital flight.
Gambling operations have been in existence in Uganda for over 50 years, with lottery being the main gaming activity carried out in the 1960s when the first gaming laws were drafted. However, since the turn of the new millennium, the gambling industry has experienced a rapid increase in activity, with various new modes and facilities being introduced, especially with the increase, amongst others, in television, advertisement and internet. A March 2019 report by the Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board on the status of gambling industry in the country details that there are 49 licensed operators. Of these, 1 is a lottery company, 16 are casinos, 32 are sports betting companies, 17 are slot machine operators, 3 are bingo companies, and 1 deals in pool betting. Of the 32 sports betting operators, 22 run physical outlets, while 9 run their businesses online. In total, there are about 1,483 gambling premises, with a majority, about 787, located in Kampala, Mukono, and Wakiso districts. In Kampala alone, Kawempe division has the highest concentration of gambling shops with about 150, followed by Makindye division with 145, Kampala Central division with 142, and Rubaga 105 shops. Wakiso district alone has 158 gambling outlets. Isaac Imaka, the mobilizer of betting and gaming operators, opined that given the size of the industry, government ought to have consulted them.
Of course, the proposal is not investor friendly, and although we recognize the fact that as government has the right to regulate the sector, without regulations, of course, we'll be living in a jungle. So we support government's attempt at regulation. Regulation should not mean that people who have sunk in money in a sector that was set up by an act of parliament, first of all, should be thrown under the bus on accusation of spoiling kids, and capital flight. These are issues that can be addressed and improved upon.
Them. According to the regulator, the Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board, the gambling industry employs about 8,959 professionals and non-professionals in various capacities. Imaka reveals that there are quasi-regulations guiding the sector, and government and the industry players need to dialogue to address any issues that are arising.
If we go on the table and government entertains us to go and say, what are the issues that you have? You know, if government issue is capital flight, you know, then how do we address it? Some of us are shareholders in companies that are operating. You get it. So if we are closed tomorrow, you know, I don't have the share that I have, so I won't have money.
Of specific concern to government is the issue of capital flight, which is as a result of the fact that nearly all the businesses are shored up by foreign investors. The huge requirements for establishing any of the gambling businesses are mostly prohibitive for Ugandans. According to the Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board, anyone applying for a license for either sports betting and slot machines, they must provide, amongst others, proof of minimum capital requirement of 250 million shillings and 1 billion shillings to open a casino. Other financial requirements include an approved security guarantee of 500 million shillings. This restricts the indigenous investors who are locked out as a result of the capital requirements. Lionel Kabenge, who is a player in the industry, told NTV the regulator body, which is supervised by the Finance Ministry, bears the responsibility and is to blame if things go wrong.
Our regulators basically sits under the Ministry of Finance. So if they say the regulator is failing, that means the ministry is failing. From where I sit, I cannot say the regulator has failed. Are there things that the regulator can do better? Yes. Are they able to in the current state? No. Why? They are underfunded.
Kabenge also described the argument of containing capital outflows as selective because the Ugandan economy is almost run by multinational companies which repatriate more money than the entire size of the gambling industry.
Now, not many people can source such money, which also brings about the problem of capital flight. If I cannot get this money from a local operator, from a local financial institution, yes, there are no funds that will actually give me money to invest. If I go out there and I take a loan, I take on a shareholder, they're giving me this money to make a profit. I have to send it back. And I believe if government wants to go into this direction, it should cut across the board.
Between the late 1950s and 1990s, government was the largest employer of Uganda's modern labor force through a number of parastatal bodies until the wave of liberalisation that came along with opening up capital accounts was set in motion by the Washington Consensus. Inasmuch as the structural reforms have inspired foreign capital investments in the same breath, it meant that capital outflow is inevitable. The Finance Ministry estimates that Uganda loses about 1 trillion shillings annually in capital outflows, mostly through payout of dividends to shareholders. Against this backdrop, Paul Lakuna, a research fellow at Makerere University's Economic Policy Research Center, opines that banning the gambling industry on the premise of containing capital outflow is counterproductive.
I think there's much more capital flight in the financial and telecommunication sector. What you call capital flight, but for me, I don't view it as capital flight. It's just everybody is obeying the rules of the game. Given our monetary policy structure, where we don't have sovereignty with monetary policy, and our exchange rate is float, we cannot have a closed capital account. It must be open deliberately to avoid contradiction of closing inflow of foreign capital or outflow of foreign capital, or controlling it to a degree which will undermine our key objectives of keeping inflation at a single digit.
In 2016, the Economic Policy Research Center conducted a study which detailed that on average, the poorest in society spend a higher proportion of their personal income on gambling compared to their richer counterparts. The study also showed that approximately 1 in every 4 adults had engaged in some form of gambling in the 12 months preceding the survey. Lakuna says government needs to strengthen regulation like it is done elsewhere.
These things are possible. They are possible. They are possible. Zoning is one of them. We cannot avoid zoning. We can't have gambling places in the central business district. the picture of it alone, it's just not good. We can't have gambling places near schools. We just have to zone. We have to find ways how to zone. We can work with our urban planners and we zone. Secondly, opening times. These are simple things. Regulating opening times. We just need more force, more work on the enforcement. Some of these rules are there, but the enforcement. I don't know the capacity of the gambling board now. The last time I was there were only 4 people, I think, and 4 people cannot enforce a comprehensive government policy. It's difficult. It just remains on people. The second one is the closing times. And the opening times. The gambling places shouldn't open in the morning. It should open in the afternoon. This is an entertainment. It's not a productive activity.
With billions of shillings at stake, it remains to be seen whether government can be transparent as powerful players scramble to have a bite at the cherry.